Hi, everyone. Today I'm here with Heather Shephard. She is a radical health coach and homeopathic doctor in training, but Heather also has a degree in nutrition and also a master's degree, I believe, in Chinese medicine. Is that what it is, Heather?
You got it.
Yep, and Heather is located in Sedona, Arizona, the beautiful Sedona, Arizona. So I'm so happy to have her here. She has some really out of the box views on health and wellness, which, as you all know, I'm very out of the box and believe that we have to open our mind to looking at a lot of different healing modalities. There isn't one way for every single person. So just watch and listen and see if any of this fits you, or it seems like it might be something you might be interested in or want to try. And the reason that I contacted Heather is because I have a client who was getting recurring yeast infections, and we weren't really sure what was causing this, but we did find out that she was drinking a lot of kombucha, which is a fermented drink. Now, it's not the only reason, but I found this amazing blog article that Heather wrote, and it was on kombucha and recurring yeast infections happening from people who drink a lot of kombucha. And we've heard so much information about kombucha. It's like this miracle drug, and this is our miracle drink, and it's the best thing, and it'll heal everything. And honestly, I know nothing about it. I really know nothing about it. And the other thing is fermented foods. So I know that there's a reason for fermentation. I eat animal products, not everybody does, but I know that even when you let meat age, it helps break down the meat so that you get more enzymes. It ferments and it almost like pre-digests the meat before you eat it. So I eat raw meat like sushi and carpaccio and ceviches and that sort of thing. So Heather, I'm going to let you kind of take it from here. I'll interject a few questions here and there, but if you could just tell us first a little bit about your background, how you got into this, and then we'll kind of go into fermented foods, and then we'll talk about kombucha specifically. So tell us, how did you get into health and wellness?
Awesome. Well, first, thanks so much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope your audience greatly benefits from our discussion today. And my journey into this field is kind of unique and diverse. It involves, personal family members who have struggled with cancer and actually passed away with cancer. When I was young, 15, my grandmother passed away with breast cancer. And that really lit this fire inside of me because I watched her go through chemo, I watched her go through radiation, and I watched her go downhill really quickly. And I deeply respect anybody's choice when it comes to whatever treatments they choose for whatever illness they're struggling with. But I saw her health go down very quickly. It was even as if those modalities, those treatments took her health down a lot quicker than the actual disease itself. And so that lit this fire in me. Like, I want to learn more about alternative health, alternative healing, nutrition, so that I can not only prevent it in myself, but, other people throughout my life as well. So that inspired me to study nutrition in college. And then post college, I went into the athletic world and did a little bit of athletic training and trained professional athletes. And then I got in a really bad car accident. And I was just driving to work one day, lost control of my car. I was the only person in the car, split a telephone pole in two, and my head just boom, knocked into the steering wheel, and I was knocked unconscious. And so I went to the hospital, all tests checked out fine, but I didn't feel fine. I was really off. I couldn't do the physical activity that I once had, which meant that I couldn't train athletes anymore. So it brought up this entire transformation, this life shift that I went through from being an athlete, being in the athletic world, focusing on, solely nutrition, to more so looking at the emotions, looking at acupuncture, holistic medicine, other modalities to help with my the dizziness, the concussion, the PTSD that came after such a big event. And so that even more so changed the trajectory of my life to bring in this whole holistic medicine piece to my life and now to my clients as well. So it's been an arduous journey at times, but very rewarding as well, with regard to how it's helped me improve my health and then my clients as well. So that's a little bit about my journey there.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's great. And I
Yeah.
know that you use a lot of different modalities. So let's just focus on the fermented foods right now. There's so much confusion about them. People hear, oh, they're good for me. I should be eating fermented foods. What are they? Do you have to be a vegetarian and vegan to eat them? Does it help
Yeah.
digestion? What is the purpose? How did they get started? How is it beneficial to our health? And just tell us a little about it, because I don't eat them. When I eat whole foods personally myself, my digestion is horrendous, so I juice
Uh-huh.
my vegetables, and that works for me.
Uh-huh.
So that works for me very well. And even
Yes.
fermented vegetable juice, as it starts to age, still works for me. But talk a little bit
Yeah.
about fermented foods.
Okay, so fermented foods, you're right. It's a super big topic. There's a lot of misunderstanding around it, but this is an ancient food in a way, because our ancient ancestors, not only in the northern hemisphere, but really around the entire world, used fermented foods, implemented fermented foods into their diets, depending on the season. So it was more so this way to preserve foods as one is going into, say, lower light seasons. So we're going into late fall, we're going into winter. And so they would take their fall harvest and make fermented foods, store them in their cellars, their root cellars, to have a source of food, a source of vegetables, to last them throughout the winter. A lot of people back then ate more of a seasonal diet, just because they couldn't go to Whole Foods or the grocery store or the co-op and pick up a banana when it was winter time. They had to be really mindful, creative, and innovative when it came to their food resources, for mostly a survival need. So this is, from my understanding, where fermented foods really came into play. They weren't so much concerned about, oh, this is a healthy food, it's going to benefit my digestion, it's going to make me feel amazing and robust and decrease inflammation levels and give me beneficial bacteria. That wasn't really their mindset. Their mindset was more so survival, and how can we prolong the shelf life of this food, so we have a food resource when it comes to these low light seasons.
But now you're talking about fermented food. Now that's different from canning, because my family generations ago grew up on a farm, and we would can beans and we would can beets.
Yeah.
Can everything. So canning something and canning peaches and canning apples is different than fermenting the food and preserving it.
You are, yes, absolutely. And if we kind of look at the progression of food preservation, it started with the fermented foods, and then it went to canning, because it didn't take as long for the food to be ready to eat. It didn't take as long to prepare it. You didn't have to bring in this alchemical reaction component of, how the salt or whatever element they were using to ferment the food was impacting. It takes a while for the food to actually be ready, and it takes a special environment, a special chemical reaction, versus canning. A lot simpler, a lot less time. And so we went from, and then people got concerned about oh, well, am I going to, we got concerned about bacterial contamination. We had a lot of fear built up around that, because there are more and more kind of these bacterial scares, that were coming into play, that we were becoming more aware of. So canning became almost like a way to reassure our minds that we weren't going to get this bacterial contamination. However, then we started to get botulism with poor canning. But
right.
so
the fermentation process, it's still a form, you're still canning, right? So you're still putting them in sort of ball jars with lids, but you don't go through that heat process. Is that what happens? So you can explain how you do it. What
Cool, cool.
do
Yeah, yeah.
if I were gonna ferment pickles, for example, or cucumbers?
Okay. Okay, cool. I love fermenting pickles. So you would get, a special kind of cucumber, usually the Kirby cucumbers used in pickling. There's various different kinds, but you would get the cucumber, whatever you're making, and you would literally put it in a ball jar, some kind of mason jar. And honestly, it could be, you could go simple or you could go really more advanced with it. Like you could put in bay leaves and peppercorns and all these spices. Some people use garlic and they put it into the can with the pickles. When you're fermenting, you need to use salt. That's what creates the bacteria. That's what the sugars in the vegetable material feed off of. It's what the cellulose feeds off of in order to create the beneficial microbes. So you need to have salt. That's what makes fermentation happen.
So there's not a starter, like when you're making yogurt or kefir or something. There's no little starter that you have to put in there.
Not for vegetables, no. Yeah, okay. You definitely don't need a starter. People use a starter. Yeah, you can use, literally, when I ferment things, salt. That's it. And so a really good quality sea salt, mix it together, tighten your jar, your lid, keep it away from the sun. And with pickles, 5 days, you'll have pickles. You can store them, then put them into a cold storage, just so it doesn't over ferment and turn into alcohol. You can store it in your fridge, somewhere cold in your home, and that will last you for several months.
So 5 days out of the refrigerator and then into the refrigerator, and then you're good like through the winter. So
you're good, yeah.
Makes so much sense now. I understand this. So the fermentation process started first for storage, then it moved to canning because of the fear of bacteria. So that's why that food is so much healthier, because you're taking the step of the heat processing out, and killing all of that bacteria in there and destroying a lot of nutrients with the heat process as well. So we know that happens. So kind of on the gradient of health, that's at a higher level. It's a higher level food. So tell us a little bit about the health benefits. What are you getting from fermented foods as opposed to canned foods?
Okay, so that's a great question. Canned foods aren't going to have any of the probiotic components because they don't have that fermentation process. It's basically just a preservative process. So when it comes to fermentation, you do have, when it comes to fermented vegetables in particular, you have that salt, and that creates the beneficial bacteria when it feeds off of the plant material. And so you're left with a host of different probiotics depending on the vegetable you have, where it's grown. It's going to have different microbes depending on the soil it was grown in. The soil is going to have different microbes. So that's going to, a little bit, if you don't clean it to death, right, some of those microbes, we hope, will end up in your final product. So you're going to have a lot more, you're going to have probiotics, you're going to have beneficial bacteria, you're going to have a lot more vitamin C. So the vitamin C content of, say, if you have just a pepper, but then you ferment that pepper, you have a jar of jalapenos, think about that. And then that fermented jalapeno is going to have a lot more vitamin C than just that raw jalapeno. The fermentation process really kicks up vitamin C levels. And fermented foods are known to have potent antibacterial, antifungal properties. They're known as a natural antibiotic. So there's a lot of health boosting, immune stimulating properties to fermented foods.
That's so amazing. So what about, I know we're talking about fermented vegetables, and really cucumbers are a fruit, we know that, but what about fruits like peaches and strawberries and, cherries, because we think of canning cherries and canning peaches and canning pears and apples. Can you ferment
Yeah.
these types of fruits as well?
You absolutely can. It's a little bit of a different process. So with fruits, you actually do need a culture starter. And so the ancient people used whey, which is the liquid portion. Think if you make homemade cheese, you have the leftover is whey. It's that liquid portion. The ancients would use whey as a culture starter for fermenting fruit. There's various other things you can use if you're dairy, if you're intolerant to dairy. Sometimes you can use a combination of lemon and other sour substances, but typically whey was like the standard approach culture starter that they use to ferment fruits. And for anyone wanting to dive into this more, I would highly encourage you, if not already, to grab a copy of Sally Fallon's Nourishing Traditions. It's old school, but it walks you through all the different, how to ferment fruit, how to ferment vegetables, and she really lays that out. She was, does a really great job. It's like a Bible. It's a huge book. But yeah, you do need a culture starter when it comes to fruits. And I found the shelf life of fermented fruits is a bit less. I would say, at least half of vegetables. So if you're fermenting fruits, you want to eat them within, a month of making the fermented peaches or cherries, for example.
Okay, awesome. I'm so excited because I have all this whey left over. I just made 3 quarts of yogurt from some fresh raw milk that I got at a local farm here. And I have all this
Awesome.
whey, and I've never known what to do with it. I've thrown it away, but then recently we got chickens, so I've been giving it to my chickens and they go
Oh,
crazy for it.
yeah.
But now I know I can use it with fermenting fruit as well. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's talk about kombucha. Kombucha is
Okay.
one of the hottest things out there. It's a fermented drink. It supposedly cures everything. There's the good and bad, and anything extreme can be too extreme, of course, for some people. And the
Yeah.
reason that I contacted Heather in the first place is because I have a client who kept getting these recurring yeast infections, and she was drinking a ton of kombucha, thinking that she was getting a really great probiotic
Yeah.
because she was having to take some antibiotics for a urinary tract infection that kept coming back and coming back and coming back. And so she
Uh-huh.
wanted to drink the kombucha thinking she's getting this probiotic. But I read an incredible blog article that you wrote that the kombucha can actually be contributing to the yeast infections. So will you talk about that a little bit? And what are the health benefits of kombucha? Are there some that are better than others? And how is it that it can actually contribute to yeast infections? I thought this is like supposed to be the good bacteria.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. This is a big topic because different people are going to react to kombucha differently, but and I'll get into this in my explanation here, but if you overdo any fermented food, you will create a gut dysbiosis, meaning an imbalance in your gut. So whether it's cucumbers or sauerkraut, or you fermented peaches, or you're drinking a lot of kombucha, you can create a gut dysbiosis and create a gut imbalance pattern. So I just want to mention that. Now, if an individual, I see this picture and this story so often that you just described in my practice as well. People think they're doing a really beneficial thing by going and getting kombucha or these fermented foods because we're taught and told that they have amazing health benefits, which is true. And we'll get into how and why to make that true. But if we overdo it, then we create a dysbiosis situation, which is very immunocompromising and can create things like hives and UTIs and acne, fatigue, estrogen imbalances, etc. So typically, the individual who reacts most strongly to kombucha, what I found is they often have an overgrowth of various different pathogenic bacteria in their body. So not just candida, but they tend to have an overgrowth of strep. So the stage often is set in childhood when they get a strep throat, when they get ear infections and they need to take antibiotics. They take the antibiotics and their strep throat goes away, right? But where did that strep bacteria go? Because we know antibiotics don't actually cure and remove all the bacteria. Well, it gets pushed down into deeper layers where it can survive, but not be an immediate threat to the body, which is the gut. So it goes down into the gut, and then we have like streptococcus bacteria sitting in there. This is just one example. This can happen with any type of pathogenic bacteria when we take an antibiotic to counter its symptoms that it's producing at the time. So often I see people who have struggled with strep infections, antibiotic use, then it gets pressed down into their gut, and then later in life they struggle with their gut health. They struggle with UTIs, which is usually a result of just a bacteria that hasn't been fully removed from the body. It's just still hanging out. And so when we look to heal our gut, because we start to have symptoms come up later in life, we look to fermented foods, we look to kombucha. So kombucha is interesting because you need what's called a SCOBY. That's the culture starter for the kombucha. You need a SCOBY, or otherwise referred to as a mushroom, in order to, that's your starter. It literally looks like this, a placenta, like this, to be like, it kind of looks like this big like placenta. And so it even has kind of that like texture. And so you put that in there into your kombucha, you put some kind of sugar in, whether it's honey, whether it's fruit, whether it's cane sugar, and that sugar and the SCOBY feed off of each other. And the SCOBY literally eats up the sugar. And so it grows. You'll see the thing literally grow inside the kombucha. And that's, a sign that it's eating the sugar, and it's in turn creating beneficial bacteria from that process. So, just exactly like you said, we're told that kombucha, is good for cancer. It's full of beneficial bacteria. It's good for the immune system. And so we start to drink it, and we start to drink it by the bottle, and it's now available by the bottle. And so what happens is, when we drink too much kombucha, we have to go back to see what it's made of and how that's impacting our body. So the SCOBY is literally yeast cultures. The main probiotics in there, because not all yeast is bad. We actually need some yeast in our gut. It's a healthy thing. We need candida in our gut. One of its beneficial properties is that it helps to chelate heavy metals. So it helps to draw heavy metals out of the body. When we get in this overgrowth situation, like candida becomes overgrowth, streptococcus becomes overgrowth, there's a lot of bacteria that they can go either way depending on their levels. They can be beneficial or they can be pathogenic in nature. So if you're drinking a lot of kombucha, you're giving your gut a lot of yeast, because that culture is a yeast culture. So this sets the stage for candida overgrowth, because you're getting way too much yeast into your body, into your gut. And so this is a real issue that the health world, I guess, or the kombucha world hasn't yet brought to light. And maybe it's because they want to just keep marketing their product, but I also don't want to downplay that, we should avoid kombucha altogether, because there are healthy ways to consume it. But another thing we have to consider is, a lot of commercial kombuchas, they want to have a quick product turnaround. So they won't ferment their kombucha as long as it needs to be fermented for that bacteria to really feast on all the sugar in that product. And so when you go into your health food store and you pick up a bottle of kombucha, you turn around the label and it has a lot of sugar in it. So this is also an issue, because not only are you getting you're drinking the yeast bacteria in the kombucha, there's also sugar in there. So if there's too much sugar in your kombucha
Mhm.
and you drink it, that sugar is going to feed off of the yeast and blow the problem up exponentially. So there's a lot going on with kombucha. Now, kombucha is also an ancient drink. It's also one of those seasonal drinks that I believe was first introduced in Russia, made its way to Asia. I'm not sure which one came first, but when they consumed this drink in ancient times, the sugar was really fermented out, and they literally drank a shot glass or two a day. So their consumption
Question
was
about the
very.
Yeah, a question about the sugar. So if they
Okay.
let it ferment long enough, they can
Yeah.
can you completely ferment all of the sugar out?
Yeah, you can get pretty close. There's a fine line because kombucha can turn to alcohol, so there's a fine line that you need to keep an eye on, and even taste test your kombucha as it's brewing, as it's going along. You're seeing the Scooby grow. Take it like a little taste of it. If it tastes like sugar, keep it going. If it's like, oh, it's almost to the point of alcohol, you stop your fermentation. You remove the Scooby, you put it in the fridge, and then you have kombucha that's super low in sugar.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like it's like what you were just saying. This is really about taking a shot every now and then. This isn't about drinking a whole bottle or two or three every single day, day after day
Yeah.
after day. This is about
Yeah.
getting a little bit of these probiotics through the kombucha, a shot a day or a shot a couple times a week. Or is there
Yeah.
an idea? I'm sure it's different for every individual because we're all so different. But I know when
Yeah.
I drink kombucha, my head starts spinning like crazy. My body's
Yeah.
hypersensitive that way. So is there
Yeah.
ideally, should people be doing a shot a day, a couple a week, or is there kind of a general range?
It's a good question. It is unique to the person. So if you sense you have candida overgrowth, I wouldn't. Kombucha isn't a fermented food that I would add into your diet at this time. If you struggle with any type of yeast, like um, yeast overgrowth in any form, you respond to yeasty foods, I wouldn't add kombucha in your diet until you've cleaned up that issue in your gut first. Um, you'll know how you respond to kombucha after drinking it, just like you said. For you, have pretty immediate symptoms. I do as well. I can't drink that much kombucha. If I do, it's half a shot glass every now and then. So it really depends on your constitution, what's in your gut. It's why stool testing can be helpful, because you can get a picture of what's in your gut, so actually what kind of fermented foods or kombucha and how much to eat or drink, because you can literally see what's there and what it needs or what might trigger your gut.
Mhm.
But just in general, for a maintenance dose, if you're relatively healthy, you don't have a candida overgrowth, you're not sensitive to yeast, you don't have a lot of yeasty foods in your diet like bread and alcohol and vinegars, a shot glass a day is plenty. Even a few times a week, a shot glass a few times a week of a really good quality kombucha. You don't want to never get the sugary types. If it's over 6 grams of sugar, I'd leave it on the shelf.
I found one that actually didn't have sugar in the ingredients at all. Is that possible? When I look at the actual ingredients, because doesn't
Uh-huh.
there have to be sugar in it to make it? But there was no
There,
sugar listed on the ingredients.
that's interesting. Yeah, there does have to be sugar in it to make it. You can't make it without some form of sugar, whether that's fruit or honey or literal cane sugar. There does need to be a type of sugar. Now, maybe they fermented it out to such a degree that it was super negligible in their final product, that when they measured the macronutrients, there wasn't any sugar.
Well, it wasn't on the nutrition label. That was on how you have the nutritional label
Yeah,
that says how much sugar is in it. But
yeah,
the ingredient list, I always look at the ingredient list as well. And there was
uh-huh.
sugar, but maybe it was fruit that was on there. See, I wasn't looking for that because I didn't know or understand it. So it could have been the fruit listed in there and no sugar as the ingredients.
Yeah, that could be. That could very well be. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
would
it's,
you say
yeah.
that the same holds true with fermented foods then? Can people overdo it on fermented foods as well? I mean, should they eat
Absolutely.
small little bits of fermented foods with their other food as well? Would you say the same thing holds true?
I I would. The same thing holds true. It depends on what's in their gut. You know, some people respond adversely to fermented foods, as you know, just like somebody would respond adversely to kombucha, because you know, one of the common bacteria in fermented vegetables is lactobacillus. So if you get too much lactobacillus, you can start to have immune reactions, hives, you can feel really fatigued, bloated, etc. So you just want to pay attention to how your body's actually responding. Like, forget the health claims that people are telling you. When you eat the food, feel into your body and observe how you're feeling mentally, emotionally, physically, and use that as your gauge as to how much you should be eating, and if that's actually a good fermented food for you to eat. But you know, sometimes I've had people with autoimmunity not unable to eat fermented vegetables because they're highly reactive to them. So, but if you're not highly reactive, yeah, a small medicinal dose, you know, a tablespoon or two a day with a meal, awesome.
I think that's so important what you said is being aware. So many people, I knew somebody, I had a very close friend at one time who grew up with horrible food allergies and felt terrible his entire life. Horrible.
Mm.
But that was his norm. He didn't know
Uh-huh.
that he could feel better. It's like that was normal to him. And that's all that he knew was kind of like feeling sluggish and, head fog and terrible digestion and all of these sort of body issues that he described. And then once he got on a cleaner diet and started eating better, had no idea that he was actually supposed to feel that way. So we really do have to be in tune with our own body, what feels right. I know almost immediately if I put something in my body, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that one again. Or if it was really good,
Hmm.
it's going to be a long time before I do that one again. So I think that's
Yes.
really interesting. So this was so helpful. You are so lovely. So happy to have you on here. I really would love to talk to you again. You're such a really beautiful, beautiful soul. And I'd love to talk to you about some other topics as well. I think that this was helpful. Is there anything else that you think that we haven't covered that we need to discuss?
Um, it was a pleasure to be here as well. I appreciate you having me on. I'll end with one thing, because it has to do with your gut bacteria, and it's kind of this unknown way that we produce gut bacteria, and you and I are sitting in it right now, and that's sunlight.
Mm.
Sunlight triggers um, the our gut microbiome, the beneficial bacteria there. It triggers different neurotransmitters that actually produce and fuel the production of certain beneficial bacteria. So you can eat as much fermented foods as you want, but if you're sitting in front of a computer or on your cell phone a lot or indoors a lot, you're not going to fully get all the benefits from those beneficial bacteria as if you were in sunlight and you had the stimulus, the natural stimulus that literally stimulates the production of thousands to maybe millions of beneficial bacteria in the gut. So um, I would just I would just add that little thread in there.
Get outside. Connect with
You get outside.
nature.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you,
yeah.
Heather. Give us your website because I know you do offer classes and all kinds of different programs. So give us your website so if people want some more information from you, they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. My website's just my name, heathershepard.com, and my first name spelled Heathar, last name Shepherd, Shepard.com. You can see a link to my podcast there. You can see a link to the Sunlight RX ebook, which teaches you how to utilize sunlight to boost your health, including your gut microbiome. There'll be some really cool classes coming up, and some metabolic reset classes that I'll be offering in Sedona coming up this fall. So yeah, feel free to hop over there.
Perfect. Thank you again for your time and let's talk again soon.
My pleasure. Have a great day. Great to connect with you.
Thank you.